to persecute that war. I mean, any king who leads the people in war doesn't necessarily go on the front line himself and hold a gun. You know, he's been involved in defending the Jewish people against many threats.
So he brings Jews back to Torah observance, he fights the wars of the lords, and then rebuilds the temple.
Rebuilding the temple and the ingathering of the exiles.
So if the other things happen, he's definitely Mashiach. If he does all of those.
That's part one. Then if he is successful in fighting those wars and he actually builds the temple, then we know for sure that he's the Mashiach, right?
So the traditional objection,
right?
One of the objections against Jesus is he couldn't be Mashiach because he died before inaugurating the Messianic era. But there's some Lubavitchers that still believe Rebbe is Mashiach, even though he didn't complete the mission. He did things no other Jew in generations had done, but he didn't complete the mission. So according to the Rambam's explanation, doesn't he fall short?
Well, I think that first, we're talking now about Mashiach from a Jewish point of view, and if we go to the Rambam, the one thing is clear is that he has to uphold the law.
Mm-hmm.
If someone who sends out pieces of matzah before Passover to encourage Jews to observe Passover, somebody's encouraging Jews to observe the Sabbath on Saturday, on the seventh day, as it has been since the beginning, somebody who is building observance, it's in the ballpark. I'm not aware that the people you're referring to ever did anything in that vein to bring people closer.
Right.
To
So there would be an argument
so
that
you can't even get to line one.
So followers of Jesus went away from Torah. They threw out the commandments. Would be your viewpoint.
Let's see if he signs.
Hang on.
Your mother Jewish?
I'm a Jew. Okay.
And you're in this. You should bury your head in the sand and be ashamed to be associated with this.
Listen, here. You want to see the permit?
Disgusting.
There's nothing disgusting. You're prejudging everything. Okay, things got a little testy there in Crown Heights. We actually had to get out of the area. So we've made our way over to Central Park where we can just regather our thoughts and get back to our subject. So what about the Messiah? According to Moses Maimonides, writing in the 12th century, this is how he'd be recognized. He'd be a learned and godly king who would bring all of Israel into Torah observance. He'd fight the wars of the Lord. He'd rebuild the temple. He'd regather the exiles. Whoever did all this was surely the Messiah. So how does Rabbi Schneerson line up with these requirements? Without a doubt, he was an extraordinary Jewish leader. He accomplished amazing things in his 92 years of life, born in 1902 and died in 1994. Came to America in 1941. In 1951, he became the leader of the Lubavitcher sect of Hasidic Jews, and he transformed this small group into a worldwide power. He was considered to be a brilliant scholar and a saintly rabbi and an organizational genius, and he was a charismatic leader who could stir his followers into a frenzy of devotion. Under his leadership, thousands of Jewish day schools and outreach centers were established around the world, wherever Jews are found. Tens of thousands of Jews became observant through his efforts. And he was the seventh Rebbe in his line. He had no children, making him the last. And there was mystical speculation about the messianic credentials of the seventh Rebbe. He was also considered a prophet. So in 1991, when he announced that the era of Mashiach, the era of Messiah, was at hand, many of his followers said, surely he's the one. And then the unthinkable happened. In 1992, he had a severe stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed and completely mute. How could this be? Well, many of the Rebbe's followers were sure he had to be the Messiah. After all, he had done more for traditional Jewish education than any Jew in modern history, and he'd helped so many thousands of non-traditional Jews embrace Judaism. Even the President of the United States and the Congress recognized his work. Surely he'd fulfill the rest of his mission. His followers set up a messianic hotline. Call this 800 number and get the latest news about the Rebbe. They wore pagers around the world, waiting for the news that he had risen from his sickness and was about to reveal himself in glory and lead them back to Israel. They even took out full-page ads in the New York Times, urging Jews to hasten the redemption. Yet the Rebbe remained ill. He was paralyzed and mute, and it forced his followers to look back into the Bible to see if the scriptures foretold the Rebbe's sufferings. It appeared that they did. Isaiah 53 said the servant of the Lord would be stricken with pain and illness for our sake, and it said that he'd be silent, like a lamb being led to the slaughter. It looked like the Bible predicted what would happen to the Rebbe. And then the great shock, 1994, he died. His followers were expecting him to be raised up full of health and strength. Instead, he died the death of a frail old man. Immediately, a biography was written about the Rebbe, stating that his death brought atonement to his generation. And everywhere there was speculation. Did he really die? Or was his death just an illusion to test the faith of his followers? Others said he rose from the dead. If you go to his gravesite, you won't find anything there. Others began to speak about his return. Others even prayed to him, saying that he carried the essence of God in human form. There was one big problem with all this. For 2,000 years, Jews had rejected another messianic claimant because he died before fulfilling his mission. They rejected the notion that his death was an atonement for the world. They rejected talk of his resurrection, his return. They rejected talk that he bore the image of God in human form. Of course, I'm speaking about Jesus, called Christ because Christ is the Greek way of speaking about the Messiah. And now the Rebbe's followers were pointing to the same scriptures that Christians use to show that Jesus, Yeshua, was really the Messiah. Maybe we need to go back to the Bible and re-examine these texts. Our search for the Messiah takes an interesting turn.
Dr. Brown and his camera crew faced open hostility in the Hasidic Jewish community of Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Prior to leaving the area, one Jewish man was willing to share his thoughts on camera.
It's a good question. I believe it could be either way. And I don't know if you've probably heard by now, but speaking to people here, you've probably heard already that according to the Talmud, the Talmud says that Mashiach, the Messiah, could come from the living or from those who have passed on already. So it tends not to be a popularly accepted one, but nonetheless it is a legitimate opinion in the Talmud, which goes back, almost 2,000 years ago. I believe he certainly could be. He was, certainly while he was alive in a physical body, he was probably the number one candidate, according to Maimonides, the Rambam, and who actually lists the different criteria that the Messiah has to fulfill. Well, I think, unfortunately, that most people don't know the authentic Torah verses. So you have a lot of Jews who they themselves don't know the authentic Hebrew. So you see, a lot of the things were actually mistranslated. Like one of the classic ones is that talks about the virgin birth, the virgin, but the Hebrew word for that in the Psalms is not Betula, which means virgin, but Alma, which means a young lady. So I think that there's many of those circumstances that you find that people, the idea of Mashiach is an authentic Torah concept. The idea of a soul and resurrection of the dead, those are real authentic Jewish Torah concepts that many Jews are not aware of. So they see it very often in other places, and then they become attracted to that. And I'm not saying that there's nothing positive there. There is, but and there's certainly a lot of similarities between what we know as the Judeo-Christian tradition. A lot of what this country is founded on. So there's a lot of similarities. I just think that many people are unaware of, they'll refer to the King James Version of the Bible or the English version, the Greek version, but they don't know what the authentic Hebrew version is.